Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with 𝘃𝗶𝗹𝗁𝗍, brought to you by Botanica Candles and More, where only the strongest roots see the light. And today's episode is 𝗃𝗏 and the Iyawo. The woman that we have invited today to be able to discuss this theme has just recently finished her year in white. She has academic credentials that are astonishing, to say the least, and is somebody that is able to recollect what this year has been like in a very fresh fashion. So please join me in welcoming Miss Natasha Obatalá. Natasha, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Bendicion Familia.
Bendicion. Thank you so much for being here. So, the Iyaworaje, right? We're referring to that first year after initiation. But before we get into how that year was for you, we want to kind of get into your background a little bit so that people kind of understand your trajectory up until actually going into initiation. So before we delve any further, first question for you is, what's your name in initiation?
Babaleti.
Awesome, beautiful. And who do you have crowned?
Obatalá.
And who crowned you, Obatalá?
You and my madrina.
Absolutely. Miss 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏, thank you so much for all the support and being able to bring all these wonderful people into Orisha. And, you know, apart from all of those spiritual credentials, what are some of your credentials within the academic world?
Well, I am a healthcare provider. I've been in the healthcare field for about 20 years, and I have 2 master's degrees, one in health administration and one in health law policy.
And what does that exactly mean?
So basically, I've been technically trained to run healthcare organizations like hospitals, nursing homes, ambulatory care facilities, things of that nature.
That's really interesting because Obatalá has so much to do with the medical field. So the fact that you spent, you know, most of your professional life in healthcare facilities is really in line with, you know, that ancestral energy that occupies you. So how long ago did you come out of your year in white?
It's only been about 2 months right now.
So, you know, pretty fresh.
Very fresh.
A lot has happened since then, I'm sure. The reason we ask all of these things up front is because with Our Roots podcast, what we're really trying to accomplish is giving a professional face to our initiates, the people who are a part of our spirituality, and letting people understand and know that the modern Orisha or Babalawo is a professional, is somebody that's prepared academically. You know, we don't all necessarily come from the same walks of life as we did in the past, but yet we still have so much to offer apart from this aspect of our spirituality. So, you know, a year and 2 months ago, you crowned Orisha, but even before then, a bunch of things were occurring. So I remember when you came and actually brought the funds to be able to initiate into Obatalá. I remember we had a conversation, me, you, and Madrina, and I told you a story, and I'll say it now. In the 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗃 was where the person was coming to accomplish great goals, whether it was initiating into Orisha, something monumental within their life and within their destiny. And 𝘃𝗶𝗱 wanted to see if they really wanted it or not, right? So he said, now that you're actually on the path of success, I'm going to create obstacles to see how much you really want what you say what you want. So I remember telling you, I said, hey, from this point forward, we've opened Pandora's box, right? Any and everything usually can and will happen. So what does that mean? We have to have a lot of patience, good character, and serenity to be able to achieve our goal and get there, right? So do you remember that conversation?
Oh, I remember it like yesterday. And then everything just manifested after that, because slowly but surely the tests started coming to me, because I don't know if you remember, but shortly after I came to bring the funds, I lost my job.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was my first test, because I had promised the Orishas that if they helped me gather the money to do Orisha, that I promised to do it. And then I found myself in a position with no job and no income. But I just remembered that I had made that promise, and that if I had faith, they would still keep me on the right path.
And we remember telling you, I mean, just because the ethical people that we are, and when you go through something as, you know, monumental as the loss of a career, basically being, you know, the professional that you are, hey, if this isn't the moment, if we need to reallocate those funds back into your personal life to be able to, you know, survive, we could do that for you.
And you offered that, and I declined.
Absolutely. And you didn't just decline, you thoroughly declined. You said absolutely not. if this is the decision I've taken and made, I'm going to follow through with it regardless of the results. And just to let you know, especially on our behalf, being that we're people that sacrifice so much for each of our crowns or licenses, you garnered so much respect within our household for that, where we were even a little worried. We're like, oh my God, is she okay? You know, that constant checking in process, because these are real life events that happen at these very critical moments. But it really makes me lean back on my study, because once again, as you walk the path of success is when these crazy obstacles and phenomenon happen, and you live that in real life.
Things that I never even anticipated. And not only once, but I was tested twice, because after I lost my job, I was living here in central Orlando, and I was looking for jobs in this location, but for some reason I found a job in Miami. So that's where I picked up and left to, because that's where my job was taking me, where I had planned to do Orisha here in central Claremont. And I realized once I was down in Miami that that was the place for me to be, because the religion seems to be accepted over there, and I was recognized in the community in my day-to-day living.
Yeah, it's definitely alive. Ifan Orisha, in my opinion, is the most alive within a place like Miami. Obviously, New York is right up there with it, but it's not uncommon to be walking down anywhere in Dade County and see a Iyawo, a 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗲, somebody with a bracelet, somebody dressed a certain way. So it's definitely much more accepted and acknowledged there. And we as elders, we were a little preoccupied, to say the least, because even though you come from a background where, you know, you've seen Ifan Orisha culture, for you to be entering into this new initiatory step and then be overstimulated by so much of it, you know, we wanted to make sure that you felt comfortable and whatnot, but you met the challenge head on, you know, and we definitely didn't expect you to leave so quickly, but Obatalá has a plan. You know, Orisha has a plan that we have to go with the flow. So,
And I don't know if you remember, just to circle back to the challenges that I met after I moved to Miami for this job, 3 months later, they let me go.
yeah, one thing after another.
Without any warning. And I was like in a state of panic at this time. And thanks to you and Madrina, you were able to center me and just let me know that this is just the challenges that are going to be coming my way. And I'm just realigning my path, and everything worked out for the best now that I see now. And then I remember when I was like having one of my panic moments, I don't know if you had like did through the keys, you know, to find out, and you said those who are generous shall never need.
Correct.
And that I'll be okay. And literally I found a job and like 9 days later.
Yeah, they're going to test you, and we're going to get into later why the word Iyawo was selected to represent the person after initiation, because of the need for patience, right? Ifa says patience is the father of good character, and what's happening throughout this year is the Orishas are going to try your patience. They're going to see how you're going to react in the face of adversity, and it's one thing after another. Well, you lost one job, now you're going to lose two. You got evicted from this place, or we got displaced, well, it's going to be two more places. They're going to put you through the ringer, because for those benefits to come, there has to be sacrifice and pain, and they're not putting us through anything they haven't
And
gone through.
And not only that, it was a lot, I feel, of character building moments, because when you make the decision to go into Orisha, you know that you're going to be born again.
Correct.
And I took that all the way to the end, because I had to let go of all my bad habits and dealing with things like if I was being challenged in the street, if someone was being rude to me, or if my neighbor was being nasty to me. There was times where I was being challenged and my character was being tested, because there were times maybe in my past I would have dealt with things differently.
Of course.
But I just kept on remembering this is one of those moments that I'm being tested, my character is being tested, and I just had to learn how to exercise control. I'm not going to say I'll always pass with flying colors.
Of course.
But progress is a process.
Absolutely. And you did wonderfully. And you know, I think you were somebody that we were so comfortable with initiating, because you understood the gravity of representing our household, right? It comes with a reputation, but each person represents a link in that reputation. You know, we can handle ourselves a certain way, but if the people we initiate don't, there's a infrequency in the link. And you performed wonderfully, because this community is so small, we'll hear something about it. Like we've had cases in the past, other people where they're like, hey, your godchild this, that, and the third, or we've seen other people conducting themselves a certain way, and it's like, well, that's not representing their house well. So one thing I'd like to ask is, how important was that support system for you when you were going through these situations? How important was it to be able to pick up, because you were mostly interacting with Madrina? How important was it to be able to text or call her?
It was extremely important, because, you know, you're kind of like sheltered too from the world. And I'm here in Florida, you know, I don't have no friends and no family. So you guys were my people. And I told you that from the beginning. That's why I felt like God and the Orishas, everybody brought me to you guys, because you guys became my spiritual family. So it was very important, because in those times of panic, I was always able to call Madrina. She was always able to like walk me off the ledge, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're still human. We still have fears, and those fears were giving me a lot of anxiety.
Absolutely, especially when you're going through this time period where you're alone. You're looking at a bunch of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲s, you know, things that don't speak back the way we do, and you're telling them all your problems. You're like, are you guys there? Are you hearing me? Are you not?
And not only that, you're a whole different person. I wasn't
Absolutely.
the same person that I went in when I went into the room. I came out someone totally different. I feel I kind of like analyze the process of Orisha, like when you go into the military. Like when you go into the military, everybody has the same uniform. They give you a buzz as corps, because you just have to be unified. So I feel like that was a part of the process, that they kind of like strip you of your identity.
Absolutely.
So that you can be born again into this new person that you're meant to be.
Yeah, and if you do it right, you allow that identity to be stripped, because the most humbling aspect of initiating into this, you know, religion is that I've been getting it wrong up until this point. Everyone who arrives in Ifá and Orisha is because they have a problem. And everybody has different issues, different situations, and this spirituality can aid with all of them. But the first thing you have to accept is, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I'm putting my life, my destiny, my trust in people I may just be meeting, energies I'm first interacting with now, and somehow they're going to make my life better. And time and time again, they do when we assimilate the philosophy and the advice, right? What were you feeling when you were about to enter into the room? You know, as we were actually like, oh my God, we're a week away, like, here we go, you know.
A lot of anxiety, the fear of the unknown. I had to learn to trust you and Madrina, because I really, our relationship was new and fresh. And I came to you with a past where other people in the religion had kind of abused me. So it was just like any new relationship, learning to trust one another and to respect one another. But also I went in there with a lot of anxiety of what was to come after.
A lot of people really don't touch on that. Like, you know, you see some people now like, hey, man, you remember when you were going in? And they're like, yeah, man, I was ready. I was calm, cool, collected. Like, nothing fazed me.
I was a hot mess. And I don't know if you remember, I started to get physically sick.
Yeah, it can have those symptoms.
I was literally, before I went into the room, I could feel a migraine coming over, because I suffer from migraines. And I was feeling the onset of a migraine. And as soon as I went into, I could feel the energy. The energy was so beautiful, but I felt like I was having like an internal battle, because I was still feeling sick, but I was trying to keep my composure, because I wanted to be able to enjoy it as well. But I feel like it was, once I got into the room, it was like almost a purge. And like all negativity, anything that I had was just being released, because I got violently sick in there.
Yeah, I recall. Yeah, and Obatalá is a deceptive energy, because, and we're going to be coming out with an Obatalá podcast soon, but he's really misunderstood in that regard, because most people see Obatalá, the white cloth, you know, he's calm, he's patient, he's all these different things. He's deceptively intense, because we've been able to take quite a few people through the Obatalá process in our house, as you know, and everybody kind of says the same thing. Like, it hits them all at once. They're like, it's beautiful, but it's intense. You know, all of those different things. So, but a lot of people, I think, don't let it on. But whenever we're about to go into that room, everybody's jittery, because it's like, what is coming? You know, the amount of trust you have to have.
It's the fear of the unknown.
Correct.
And you have to put your trust and everybody in that room. And it's not easy just to trust strangers, but you have
No.
to. But that's where faith comes in.
Absolutely. And we had a decent amount of time together before we actually took you in. I think it was about a year to a year and a half, different services. We gave you a couple different deities before we brought you in. So at least you were sound enough, the same way we recommend everybody to be sound enough to kind of try people out, walk them out, see how things go. Because I always say things don't get better afterwards. They need to be as good as they are before you go in, so you know what to expect, right? So as far as the actual Orisha process, like we're in the room, eyes are closed, boom. How difficult was it? So that, and the reason I ask this is because there's going to be people watching this that are like, oh my God, I'm thinking about doing it. I already gave the money. I'm getting closer. What should I expect? So without going into detail, like intensity wise, how difficult was it? Or do you think it could be for somebody else as well?
I mean, it's difficult because I was very anxious, but it's not something that you can't do. It's just like mind over matter.
Correct.
But, it's definitely something that can be done. And I think what was giving me the most anxiety was losing my hair, because I knew that was going to be.
That's a big thing for the women.
That was going in there knowing that I wasn't going to have no hair. That was just kept on playing on in my mind.
That's a big thing.
So, but I knew that it was the sacrifice that I had to make. And the Orishas, they see the sacrifices that you make, to make the things happen. So
absolutely. And you did wonderfully. Nobody dies. That's what I tell everybody. Some people, it becomes too intense for them. Like, hey, nobody passes away here. And we even told you there are houses that don't cut the hair, right? We were just uber frank and uber transparent with you. And the reason we base ourselves off of that is because the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍 speaks of why the hair interrupts with the ceremony. So that's why it's got to go. And once again, you exceeded immediately. Hey, if this is what needs to be done, that's what I have to do. And that's the best mentality to go in with, and that's where the trust and all those things come into play. Now, ceremony's done. We just took you through the ringer for 7 days, right? What was that first night? Because you actually were living in Miami when we did Orisha. You came up to Orlando. We did it here. What was that first night like heading home? Like, now I'm alone in the car with my santos. I'm on my way home. What's running through your mind?
So many different things, like what is life going to be like? What is this new chapter for me? Me just getting to be okay with myself, because I was not the same person physically that I walked into the room when. And devoting my time and just developing that relationship with my Orishas. I was happy to be home, though, because I did get put through the ringer for 7 days. So I got to say, boy, it was sweet to be home.
And what was it like, I mean, when you were home alone at that moment and you're looking at now this altar that you've constructed, what were the first things that you really said to your santos now that you had brought them into your space?
Honestly, I thanked them for all my blessings and helping me to achieve this, because this is something that I had wanted to do for a long time. But, it's a process. So I was very thankful to have accomplished it and to have gotten through the ceremony.
Yeah, it's very gratifying, especially when it's done and it's like, now this is something no one can take away from me, right? All of the obstacles, all the sacrifices, it culminates in that one moment where I made it,
That's how I felt, like I made it. I did. I was proud of myself.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a license. It's a degree. It's like when you walk across that stage and it's like, hey, you're recognized.
This is my credentials now.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of credentials, with the credentials you have and, how you're very active in your industry, what was the first day at work like?
I was nervous.
Sure.
Because I was in my attire and they never see me dressed like that. And I wasn't very vocal about what I was doing. I just said I was going to be off of work, and I just went back to work. And
that's wild.
And it's surprisingly, there was people in the office who were familiar with the religion, and they recognized me right away, and they were like, "Bendicion, Iyawo." And I was like, wow, is it that noticeable? And I guess
it's a glow. You guys have a glow. We have a glow when we come out of the room, and it's such a different energy, a different aura. And being in a place like Miami, where it is so alive, and some people aren't private about it. They're very much like, hey, bendición, hey, this, that, and the third, this is who I am. It For some people, it's an easier environment to integrate into.
And with that being said, I look back now that was a blessing in disguise, because months ago I had lost my job and I was planning to do my year up in Central Florida.
Yeah.
And then that's not where they took me. They took me down there somewhere where the religion is accepted and recognized, where I don't think I would have been in a place where I've been very much recognized. I might have been scrutinized.
Yeah, it's a smoother transition. I mean, where you were, I can't imagine there's many Orishas out there. But, we find our way everywhere, but it's definitely a higher demographic down south. And it's funny you even mentioned about the work thing, because, I think of my mother. When we did Orisha together, obviously the hair thing, right? That was very big for her. And I remember I actually bought her the wig that she utilized throughout the year. It wasn't cheap either. And I said, Mom, how was work? She said, man, the looks. I'll never forget the looks that they were giving me. But she made it happen just like all of you guys make it happen. It's sacrifice.
And I didn't even do the wig thing. I just did the pañuelo on my head.
Nice.
So I was like doing it full throttle.
Yeah, definitely. And as far as, we're talking about a year, right? 365 days of the same thing, day in, day out. What were some interesting moments that you can recall that really stuck out to you?
I had to lean a lot on my Orishas and my 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, because there were times where I felt alone and life was challenging me, and I would question my journey. And I would just lean on my 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 and my Orishas and just pray and meditate. And I felt that would help me get my balance back.
Your 𝗃𝗲 spoke of that. I remember on the third day when the 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗃 was really, evolving that conversation. He spoke of the importance of, 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗿 and really the alignment there. And, even within this last ceremony we did, you could see the development from that consistency. So you see how
I really dedicated myself day in and day out. Out of all the things that I dedicated myself to do, I really dedicated myself to my spiritual elevation and the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 and aligning my spiritual court, because I feel like that was the deal breaker for me, because I feel so much centered.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was being pulled in so many different directions before I wasn't.
So how important was 𝗃𝗲 for you then? As you're going through the year, you're periodically looking at your book, I assume.
I was always looking at my book.
How much did that help you?
So much so.
As far as reminders?
That's all I did the whole year, was read my book and my misas to make sure that I was fulfilling all the suggestions that they had given me. Like if it was something in the past, I knew that had already happened, but I also, the suggestions that they gave me for the future, I wanted to, everything is so brand new, you can't remember everything. So I just did little gentle reminders so I can make sure that I stay on the right path. And one of the big things was to make sure that I, worked my 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 and my spiritual alignment.
Well, the reason I emphasize on that is because you do have some houses, and like we were talking about before we started recording, everybody does things a little bit differently, right? But within our house, our decisions have been guided by what gives the best results to our godchildren, clients, etc. Hearing how important that notebook was for you, or those results were for you, you have some houses that, they kind of are more restrictive with that information being revealed to the Iyawo, so that they can kind of have a moment of re-encounter. But at least with us, with the way we do things, and now being confirmed by you, we give you everything immediately, because you need that. Your 𝗃𝗲𝗿 is not going to benefit me. That was like
my dictionary, my encyclopedia, my source of knowledge.
Yeah.
Besides you guys.
Of course. But, even in the moments where, I might have an appointment, Madrina might be with one of our children, you have the greatest bit of advice, which is Orisha. The only thing that the elder is going to do at that point is clarify things, but the base knowledge, the base message is going to be right there. So that's why we immediately give you everything, because we want you to grow. When we look at, even when a gentleman is initiated into Ifa, we all say the same thing. That first year is crucial for study and alignment. So we applied that same concept to Orisha, and we've seen that you guys have been able to excel rapidly due to it. What was the biggest adjustment of the Iyaworaje? Because there's a bunch of rules, there's a bunch of restrictions, the first 3 months, then the rest of the year. What was the most, intense one for you?
I think the biggest struggle for me sometimes was having to eat on the floor.
Okay.
Sometimes that just grew on me. I was like, okay, I'm over this.
Absolutely. I mean, it can be, if you look at it in a, in a contrary way, it can almost be a little demeaning. Like I feel like a child again. But once again, we're going back to that stripping of the identity, right? And it's to really build that relationship with your orishas, because they're on the floor. So it's really a way to commune with them, because after a certain point they change position, you change position, and it just builds that bond that much more. They're your only friends.
And I was going to say that I use that as my bonding moments. And I found myself times, especially when I had lost my job, when I had woke up in the middle of the night and I was having like anxiety attacks. And I would literally go over to my mat and lay down with my orishas and just pray with them. And I had a calmness come over me.
Well, it's the one time. I mean, if you're not somebody that has a partner or has children living with you, they're really the only people you're interacting with. You're looking at this cement head and, having a full-on conversation. Most people would look and be like, well, there's some instability there. But for people like us, it's very normal. And
they become my people.
Absolutely. That's the gang. That's the group.
I call them my gang.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're there when you're going through it, when you have a good moment, when it's not so great. They'll never judge you. They'll never abandon you. They'll always be right there, And the Orishas did this on purpose. When we look at the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, the Orishas made the Iyawo go through it on purpose, because one of the first Iyawos, or people initiated, they came with a lot of needs. They weren't able to economically handle all of the pressures that the initiation comes with, right? So each of the Orishas said, we're going to help you, but it's going to come with a cost, right? So Oshun said, I don't want to see you at the river, and I don't want to see you wearing makeup. Yemaya said, I don't want to see you at the ocean, and you have to be home with your children. 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗍 said, I don't want to see you at the cemetery, and you can't use anything with fragrance. They literally started putting these restrictions on the Iyawo so they could understand the magnitude and gravity of the sacrifice that it took, even though they weren't able to fulfill it, for the Orishas to actually align them and reincarnate them. So that's why some people are like, man, why is the Iyaworaje so hard? Why do we do things the way we do it? It's in the Odu 𝗃𝗶𝗏, because the Orishas, it wasn't a matter of punishment. It was a matter of discipline and realignment, and we need that.
And I actually underestimated all those simple little things.
Oh, yeah. These little liberties, these little luxuries.
Not wearing makeup, I could do that. Not getting my nails done, I could do that.
Sure.
Not, wearing perfume, I can do that. Not having hair, I could do that. And it's just like, no, it was so hard. And it just humbled me in a way. And it just took me down to just like build me back up.
Yeah, and you come out stronger because of it. And you have a new appreciation for things. And that's where I believe the real rebirthing process comes, because when we're born, where are you from again?
Brooklyn, New York.
Yes, throw it up, BK. When you're from the United States, like even when we're from places like Brooklyn, Miami, etc., where things might be a little more difficult, we still have certain luxuries, right? And I think when we're born into a capitalist system like that, and we're talking about a system or spirituality that comes from a very old world, ancient concept, they want you to feel what they felt. So I think that's where the rebirthing process comes, because it's a whole new different way of life that you have to assimilate now. And if you don't, you start seeing the repercussions from it. So you start to really analyze yourself, like, I need to be home before the sun goes down. I need to sit on the floor. I need to do this. You start, your own conscience
and you have to develop chaperone. Those habits too, because I found myself sometimes making mistakes because, sometimes you just absent-minded.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I messed up. And then I'm just like, you didn't do it on purpose.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to grow habits to do things.
And that's why even before you went into the room, we told you 2 weeks beforehand, start, wearing more white, start, assimilating the rules.
Start preparing your brain to accept these things as habits.
Absolutely. So that when you come out of the room the first day, it's not like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. You're already getting the motors and things warm so that it becomes second nature. What was the easiest part for you? I mean, what was the easiest thing to kind of relinquish that really didn't affect you too much that maybe you thought was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this, and then, it's not that bad?
My time and energy to the 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏, because it was, difficult to work a full day, having all the stress of work, and, having to come home and make sure that I dedicate that time every single day. That became a little bit tedious, but I always made it happen because it made me feel better.
Yeah, and you know, when we're talking about being a Iyawo, you are a spiritual sponge. You know, especially if you're working in the medical field or if you're around a like you have some people that work from home, they might not go through the same Iyaworaje that you went through
Right.
where
And because of my job, all the different elements that I was exposed to, too, I used the boa to make sure I cleaned up
exactly.
the energies that I might have picked up at the hospital or with the patient that I
Yeah.
was seeing.
Yeah, and you're allowed to be there because that's your job. You know,
Hmm.
Orisha never gets in the way of money. But that's why we emphasize on the tools that you have so that you can protect yourself. Because even though we have to go to work, you know, there's still things at work that can harm us or disalign us.
Hmm.
That's why we emphasize so much on the 𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗲 or the things you have so you can get rolling already. Because once you become Orisha, your life, your destiny, your spirituality is completely in your hands. You know, like we were just saying before recording, you know, the way we do things, we completely independendize people as soon as you're done. From the moment you walk out of the room, you have everything, you know, because we want to empower you, you know, and that's kind of the pedigree of our home. You know, what was it like after a whole year in white or a year and a week, I think the way we do it? What was it like not wearing white for that first time?
It felt so weird.
Yeah.
But I do love wearing white, so I still wear all white sometimes. But it felt a little weird, not eating on my plate,
Yeah.
not using my cup, being able to go to the beach,
Yeah.
go do my nails, those things. It's a readjustment.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now where it's like I can do this and not have any repercussions from it. But you reassimilate. You kind of get institutionalized a little bit. You know, when
Yes.
you're in an apartment or a house for a year, it's like I don't want to go back to normal life.
It's
You know?
ironic because it was so tough for me to adjust to eating on the plate
Yeah.
and with the cup. And then
Or
after
somebody
that,
giving you a dollar bill or somebody serving you something. You
yeah.
know?
And then after it was done, I felt weird not doing it because I
Yeah.
was doing it for such a long time.
Yeah. A lot of people ask us, you know, why the year in white in our tradition, and the year in white comes from an Odu known as 𝗃𝗏𝗏, right? And in the Odu 𝗃𝗏𝗏, it speaks of the goose. The goose had a bunch of different colored feathers and whatnot, and life was going very difficult for him. He wasn't well received in his home by his wife and children. People at work were demeaning to him. In society, he was kind of overlooked, and he was becoming very depressed, right? And he was looking for a solution because he was at the end of his rope, per se. So he went to visit the Babalawo. And Oromila told him that he needed to initiate into Orisha and wear white for a year to be able to resolve his issues. And he said, I'm not going to be able to do that. Like, I'm a goose. You know how hard it is for me not to get dirty?
Mm-hmm.
And Orula said, this is what Ifa is saying for you, my brother. And the guy kind of looked around and said, well, I got the money. I'm going to do it because I really have no other options here. No one's been able to give me a solution. So they took him to heaven, right? Which is kind of what happens when you do Orisha. You enter heaven again. And, you know, he came back dressed in all white. And he went from being the goose to the swan. His new name was 𝗀𝗍𝗃, which means I see them coming. And when people saw him in all white, they were like, oh my God, you know, what happened to you? What did you do? You know? And he explained to them, well, I initiated and, you know, I feel great. And people loved him. People admired him. He became a figure. And that's kind of what happens to all of us. Because you mentioned how people looked at you, how they'd interact with you, the energy, the aura. That's why we do things the way we do it. In Africa, they do it as well, not for an elongated period. But at the end of the day, the color white, for whatever extended period of time it is, it has that effect, right? And another instance of when we wear white within the Lukumi tradition is in the Odu Obekana. And what happened is there were female Iyawos or initiates who would wear their all white, but they were still feeling like negative effects, like the energy. Like they still felt kind of unprotected. When they went to visit Oromila, Ifa told them that they needed to perform sacrifice with white cloth and utilize it on their bodies somehow. So when they did that, they kind of took the white cloth and put it over their shoulders. And then the shawl was innovated, right? And Obekana is where the shawl of the Iyawo, the female one specifically, is utilized. So at that moment, it became staple for all of you guys. You know, those first 3 months where you're completely, there's one behind you, if I'm not mistaken. And it's almost like, oh my God, I'm in a sleeping bag all day. But all of this is just to protect you, because really what we've done is spiritual brain surgery. We've opened you up. You have a gauze on, per se, and we're just
you're
trying.
very vulnerable.
Yeah, you pick it up immediately, and that's why all of these places are really taboo. You know, and to be honest with you, I got to ask you this based on all this. Do you miss it at all? Do you ever kind of wake up and be like, man, it's over?
Not really. It was so hard.
Yeah.
It was a very difficult year for me. That when it finally came, I'm like, oh my God, it's finally here.
Yeah.
I did it. Like when you're running and running and running, you see that finish line. That's how I felt. I'm like, yes, I did. It was an accomplishment for me. It's like school. When I went for my master's degree, I love learning. But like when you're in it and you're in the grind, it's pain. So I was just looking for, I'm like, man, I can't wait to graduate.
It's mixed feelings. It's a love-hate thing because it's like, I know I'm bettering myself. I know I'm learning new things about myself. I don't look bad right now. But at the same time, it's like, man, I don't even want to look at the calendar because it just reminds me I'm one day further away from, you know, having that freedom again, you know. It's interesting how that kind of works. But when we talk about that support system, especially, you know, with your madrina and whatnot, you know, it really is unfortunate. Sometimes we see people come in and they're Iyawos or they're recent initiates, and they don't have that support system to be able to, you know, pick up the phone or go visit someone for whatever reason. You know, when we look at the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗏, it speaks of how important it was for the godchild to be able to visit the godparent, to be able to receive confirmations or clarity. And, you know, there's a story that speaks of when Orula's godson wasn't practicing Orisha as much anymore, or Ifa, and he wanted to become a farmer, right? And he was making money, he was doing okay, but he just wasn't seeing the fruits of his labor. He wasn't happy at that point, right? And, you know, the story goes that, you know, when he went looking for his godfather embraced him with open arms. And his godson said, you know, how can you accept me after I disappeared for so long? How could you tolerate me distancing myself from our tradition, you know, for so long? And he said, everybody strays. You know, the most important thing is that my doors are still open to you, you know, when you need me. You know, now that you went through this year, you know, how did that strengthen your relationship with your elders? You know, just that accountability and being able to have that open door policy.
It definitely strengthened our relationship because every time I needed you guys were there. And I don't know, it was just me and madrina, we developed this bond that she knew, like when I was going through something, if I was calling her, like, oh, let me answer the call because, you know, Natasha needs to speak to me, because we just had that bond. And there were times where, you know, I was still developing my capabilities, and I was getting like a lot of messages in my dreams, and I didn't know how to translate the meaning, and I would reach out to her and she would, you know, explain the dreams. And it was so important to me because it was my mental me understanding what I was going through at that time.
Yeah, definitely beautiful to see the way you guys have kind of flourished within that madrina hijada relationship. And, you know, with the way our house kind of works, being that we are about empowerment, and then also the fluidity of functions that we have happening at any moment, right after you finishing your year, you know, we actually initiated somebody else into Obatalá, right? And your god sister Akira. And, you know, without going into too much detail, you know, coming out of the year, what was it like? First question, what was it like seeing it being done to somebody else? You know, seeing them go through those preliminary steps?
It was definitely eye-opening because you get to see it all on the other side, because there's a lot of moments you don't know what's going on. And I was like, oh, this is what was happening. But it was a great learning experience.
Sure.
So I felt like a sponge, and I was able, it excited me. Like, wow, this is what I'm going to be able to do and help people, because this is what I came into the religion to do, to be a servant and to help people. So that, you know, excited me.
Yeah, and now after going through the preliminary steps, what was it like seeing what got done to you in the room? Because that's one of those things when you're going in, you're thinking like, you know, a dragon's going to come in and, you know, a comet and all these other things. But when you see the actual process,
I was like, oh, this is what was happening. And it wasn't so bad, because in my mind, I was so anxious and so fearful because I didn't know what was lying on the other side. But then as I realized, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Things were a little bit, you know, crazy. There's a lot of things going on, but
yeah, you begin to realize, you know, because
there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and when you're in that room and you think it's smaller than it actually is, and everything's kind of caving in on you, and when you actually see it, you're like, oh my God.
And not only that, you could feel the energy.
Yeah, it's when you cross, you know, everybody knows there's a curtain on the door. When you cross the curtain, it's like, it's different. It's like, I would liken it to a surgery room, like an operating room. Like it's completely sanitized. Maybe not physically or medically, but spiritually, it's like a cloud. I'm not sure if you feel the same way or you get that kind of feeling.
It's kind of like when you go into a church and you prepare the altar. It's like you're walking into the altar. That's what I felt like.
It's a sacred space. It's a
sacred
clean space.
Yeah.
What was the first thing you did when your year ended? Like, you know, when you were going through that year, you're like, man, as soon as this is over, I'm gonna go do this. Am I going to the beach? Am I going to the club? Like, what am I doing?
Honestly, the first thing I went to do was go get a manicure and pedicure.
There you go.
And then I went to the beach because I really did miss the beach, and I had myself a little glass of wine.
Hey, you deserve it. I mean, when you do the Iyaworaje correctly, you know, those are the fruits of the labor, you know, and the Orisha recognizes the sacrifice and the discipline. Knowing what you went through, whether it was Orisha, whether it was the Iyaworaje, you know, would you do it again? Knowing everything in a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat.
That's awesome.
It changed my life. It literally changed my life mentally and physically. Orisha saved my life.
That's beautiful. I mean, what do you think the biggest lesson you learned throughout the year?
Faith. And patience.
And how, well, that's awesome, because that's the point we're going to with patience in a little bit. But how was your faith strengthened? Like, how did you, what really made you feel like that link between you and your 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲, as they like to say?
Because I felt like no matter what bumps I encountered, I always came out on top. So I had to mentally tell myself, okay, you might be in a low, but they're going to get you to the high soon. I just have to keep on reminding myself of that. And that's where my faith had to play a big part, because sometimes your mind can play tricks on you.
Oh yeah, especially when you're alone. You're in the box, basically. You're in the hole.
Yeah.
And
like I said, it's difficult because I don't have friends and family. So, you know, if you do Orisha and you have friends and family you can lean on in the house, it's like I was completely alone. But that's why I think I was able to bond with them more, because they were my people. They became my people.
Your family.
Yeah, my gang.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when we look at the concept of patience, I remember the old 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 used to tell me the word Iyawo, or the concept of Iyaworaje, means patience in its entirety. And the whole concept of the Iyaworaje is born in the Odu of 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗏, or 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, right? And what occurred here is there was a woman, her name was Iyawo, which means mother or princess of the house of Iyawo, right? And she was a woman that was born into royalty, and her father, the king, wanted her to find a mate or a partner that was going to be a perfect complement to her. But needless to say, she was a little bit difficult, right? So when these various suitors were like, yo, the king's daughter is about to get married, let's see if we can get next in line, everybody failed, you know, and she would do this on purpose. She would do things to irk them. You know, she tried to poison one of them, and another one, she did some inappropriate things with his clothing. She was just getting rid of suitors left and right. So the king had heard of one man that he was very interested in becoming his son-in-law, and his name was Orula. But Orula was a really smart guy. He said, everybody's failed up until this point. Let me read myself to make sure I go prepared, because this isn't an easy woman, it seems. When he reads himself, the Odu 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is revealed, also known as 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝗏, which means 𝗿𝗏 has patience. And Ifa told him that he didn't need to perform any other sacrifice than that of patience, to have divine and complete utter patience with what was about to occur and not lose his good character and conduct. He went, he met the princess, he met the king, he started courting her, they started living together, and she did everything possible to make this guy go away. Poisoned his food, insulted him, anything. But she realized it wasn't working, because everything he would just respond with, okay, honey, and he'd just continue. So she said, I'm going to get him now. So she said, you know, I'd like to meet your mother. And he said, well, unfortunately, my mother's deceased. And she said, well, I'd like to go to her grave to pay homage. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, in his mind, he's like, wow, you know, we're turning a new leaf. Like, this is great. But when they get to the cemetery, Iyaworaje stood on top of his mother's grave and defecated. And he just looked at her, and inside he felt this like horrid rage. He said, I want to rip her to shreds, right? And he remembered what Ifa had told him. And when he looked at her, he said, honey, that was probably a mistake. Things happen. Don't worry about it. And she literally had an epiphany and said, I need to marry this man because no other man is going to tolerate me crapping on his mother's grave. And she looked at him and said, I've been horrible to you. I want to make things right. And magically, she turned all of her excrement into like gold and money and things like that. And she said, I'm ready to marry you. The king was elated. They did the marriage rites and whatnot, and everything turned out wonderfully. And eventually, 𝗏𝗏𝗏 became king as nature kind of progressed. But when we look at the phrase 𝗂𝗍𝗍, it got condensed to Iyawo, which means bride. Because some people ask us, they say, well, if the word Iyawo means bride in Yoruba, why do we utilize it for male initiates? Because they're occupying symbolically the same place that 𝗂𝗍𝗍𝗍 did, right? So you marry your Orisha because they are the perfect complement and not necessarily what you want. What you need. Because a lot of children of Obatalá come to me and they're like, Baba, I'm not a child of Obatalá. I'm wild, crazy. And I'm like, that's what you need.
Yeah, that's what I needed.
You need that patience. You need that serenity.
You need calm.
All those
peace.
Things.
Because I was the total opposite.
And you see how it morphs you. The Orishas are they're gonna force you. They're gonna break you to be able to fix you. And that's where the patience concept comes in, because that's why you get put through the ringer here, because that energy of Iyawo, who was in actuality 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗂, was trying the person's patience. Let's see if you're deserving, because Orula went through it. He had to have patience with Iwa. And how was he blessed and benefited from it? She turned all of the excrement that he had gone through and tolerated into gold, wealth, and whatever else you want to interpret it as.
I can't even tell you so many different times that the universe was challenging me, and I just had to say, patience, exercise control. This is a character building moment. This is a test.
Absolutely. And, being someone that survived and also thrived from the process, I think, with whatever we do, it's so important to give back. And what would you say to anybody that is going to be entering into their Orisha ceremony or is now entering their year in white? What could you tell them that could possibly provide them with some, confidence and comfort as they move forward?
To always stay faithful, to trust the process, and to always remember that progress is a process.
Absolutely. It's only a couple letters that separate the two. Natasha, wonderful conversation. I mean, do you have any final thoughts for the religious community? Anything you'd like to express now that you have entered into the phase of Olorisha, the phase of possibly Iyaworaje one day, where you can be that point of contact to bring somebody else in? Is there anything you'd like to leave the people with?
I just say that I am blessed, and I feel so grateful to be able to have accomplished that, because it's something that I wanted to do such a long time, and that it was a life changer. It was literally a game changer for me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Not only this conversation, but you choosing us to be able to take you through that process and seeing how much initiation and Obatalá has provided you, and knowing all that you're going to give back to the community. So from our Roots podcast, your godmother, myself, our house, thank you for being an example.
No, thank you for having me, and I'm blessed to have you guys too.
Ashe. Guys, couple points I want to bring up before we disconnect. If you like this shirt or the merchandise, please tap on that link to be able to purchase it at Botanica Candles and More, where you can find bundles and other things to be able to help you in your daily spiritual routine. If you're looking for more specific products and inventory, please feel free to call the store at 407-440-2086. If you haven't had the opportunity, please subscribe to the channel, share it, like it, comment on it, and be sure to tell somebody about it when you have the free time. From all of us here at Botanica Candles and More, Our Roots podcast, myself, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲. Until next time, guys, see the light.